thing. It's a group. Oh, hey, Sam's here. So, yeah, is that part of it? It's impersonalizing.
Well, it's partly personalizing, but more fundamentally, it's because of a fairly recent development in technology. Up until now, we have built adaptive machines. For example, adaptive braking, where it can tell if the wheels are not turning at the same speed, it will figure out how to make them turn at the same speed so that you get even braking. So there's all kinds of adaptive systems. But in the 21st century, we now have machines that not just adapt, they learn. They learn autonomously and autodidactically without being told, without being given the knowledge. They can construct the knowledge autonomously, which is to say they learn. Now, up until now, we're perfectly happy to say, well, my dog can learn new tricks and my baby can learn, okay, and sometimes even politicians can learn. But we didn't used to talk about machine learning until quite recently. But now we talk about machine learning, and we're getting to the point where it's a reality, and we don't dispute the phenomenon of machine learning. But anything that learns, if you try to keep track of how much knowledge it's acquired over time, you have something called a learning curve. Well, we've talked about learning curves, with respect to humans forever, for probably a century. And the thing about learning curves is they have a steepness. You can learn rapidly and you can learn slowly. And you can also have wiggles in learning curves because you can learn something incorrectly and have misconceptions, incorrect models, which you eventually have to throw away because they give you the wrong answer. So as soon as you talk about not only the slope of a learning curve, but the curvature of a learning curve, now you're talking about second derivative in mathematics. And learning curves, whether they're human learning, animal learning, insect learning, machine learning, they're going to have wiggles. They're going to have second derivative. And the question is, how do you characterize the curvature of a learning curve? Well, in humans, the curvature of a learning curve characterizes affective states, which we call emotions. I was surprised, I was disappointed, I was confused, I was satisfied. So when you talk about the curvature of a learning curve, you'll end up using affective states, which humans will recognize. You'll say, I was surprised, or I was confused, or I was disappointed. Well, when machines learn, they're going to have these same curvature effects. And how are you going, what vocabulary terms are you going to use? Are you going to completely invent a whole brand new set of vocabulary terms for machine learning, or will you simply adopt the same vocabulary terms that people use? And my argument is, why invent a whole new set of clinical terms that nobody knows what they mean when you've already got a perfectly good set of terms that you apply to animals learning or humans learning?
The problem I'm seeing is that in the learning, you don't really have the words that the difference that make the difference. That say, for example, okay, human learning has two variables that's really important to my opinion here. One is amount of energy you have, meaning that you may run out of energy. With machine can go on and on and on and on and on and on without losing energy. The second really important parameter is emotion. Human being, we get this emotion that for whatever reason, you just be happy, and then so if you're happy and learn, if you are sad and learn, it's two different learning curve altogether, right? So again, the difference between learning machine, I call that logical learning versus illogical learning. Illogical learning is the emotional affected by emotions state learning, and the illogical learning is affected by all the human emotion, but then the logical. So as engineer myself, we solve the problem with the logical mind. We throw all the emotion out the window.
You see, in human brains and animal brains, you have chemicals, you have neuropeptides, okay? And in machine learning, you don't have neuropeptides, you just have signals in electrical circuits. Now, you could build a machine that had some chemical component, some molecular component to the way it represents things. So you can represent knowledge in pure signals, electrical signals, but you can also represent knowledge for example, a computer represents knowledge as magnetic fields stored on a surface of a hard drive, which is to say you've got electrons in some configuration. Well, electrons in some configuration is also true of molecules. What are molecules? It's nuclei and electrons in some configuration. So at some point, you have this overlap between molecular storage of information and electrical signal storage of information. At some point, when you've got memory, you can store computer memory the way a battery stores energy. The battery stores energy as chemicals. So at some point you say there really isn't any substantive distinction other than the particular molecules that are doing the work. So if you have serotonin or dopamine or adrenaline or whatever versus silicon dioxide or whatever, does it really matter which molecules are doing are recruited to do the job? Is there any fundamental reason why the molecules that brains use and the molecules that batteries use are different molecules? From a point of view of physics, it's just the way they behave. Josh.
Yeah.
This is kind of an existential question. I don't know if I've ever asked you, Barry, but do you want to give ones and zeros, digital computers, analog signals like chemicals?
Well, the point in calculus, you can get the equivalent of an analog signal if the quanta are tiny enough. So in an hourglass, if the grains of sand are arbitrarily
I know you can do it, but that wasn't my question.
So the word calculus, literally the word calculus means pebbles.
I know you can do it. I'm not worried about you can do it. I've heard you talk enough to know that you could mathematically and scientifically create these signals, create these effective situations. Do you want to do it? Like,
you don't have a choice. Electrons are discrete. So an analog signal, if you have an analog signal, it's still Avogadro's number of electrons. It's 10 to the 23rd electrons, and the electrons are arbitrarily small, but still they're quanta. So
I'll say it more plain and clear. Do you want to give computers emotions, Barry?
I don't. What I want to do is use the vocabulary that are commonplace.
But do you want to give them, like, you've seen those facial structures, you've seen the new Disney robot that goes, do you want to give them that affective state where you ask the computer after you did a pre-trained transformer model, how do you feel about what I just taught you? Do you like it?
There's no reason not to use the same vocabulary terms for computers as for animals and living systems, because ultimately a cognizant machine is going to be functionally indistinguishable from a human. Already you've got deep fakes where you can't tell, is it live or is it Memorex? The deep fakes are so realistic, the simulacrum is so similar that for all intents and purposes, they're indistinguishable. And remember the Turing test? If you can't tell if it's a machine, if you can't tell if it's carbon or silicon, then does it really matter if it's carbon or silicon? What's holy about carbon?
That's the existential question right there. Do we
and
want to
my argument is
emotions?
carbon chauvinism. Carbon chauvinism is chauvinism.
Yeah. So in other words, you're a transhumanist, Barry?
I'm sorry, you're both talking at once.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I want to flip your question around. Is there a need for helping the machine to have emotions so that we can interact with it in a more natural way?
I mean, think about the word emotion. If you take it apart, emotion, out of which motion occurs, affect causes motion. So if your furnace and thermostat says it's too cold in here, my affect is it's too cold, I'm going to turn on the furnace. Out of the affect, you have a motion. emotion causes behavior. Either you go towards, the simplest one is I have an appetite, I go toward the thing I like, or I'm repelled, I'm aversive, and I move away from it. Emotion causes motion.
Yeah, I used to explain this to all of my employees when I had a $750,000 printer, which was actually a giant copy machine. It was a French copy machine.
Mhm.
And I would tell my people that would run it, this isn't a live thing. This has a lot of moving parts. It's very expensive. And it has feelings and emotions, and you need to be very gentle with it, and you can't just whack it and open it and pull the paper out. You've got to look for every tiny little, a little tiny bit of paper that's stuck in one of the rollers will affect the entire machine. It's printing 65 pages per minute, or what was it doing, 120 pages a minute. It was a very fast, huge, giant machine with a bunch of rollers. And some of my employees would just open it up, rip the paper out, press go, and then it would break down again. And I would say, printers, computers, they have feelings. They're alive. Like, treat them well.
Yeah.
And
I'll give you another example. A week or so ago, the check engine light came on my car, and the diagnosis was check your emission systems. So I had to take it in the dealer because it doesn't give you the code. It just says check. So the code came up with a numerical code. The guy looked it up, and it said, among other things, check the air boot. Now, what's an air boot? So he opens it and he shows me. He says, you see, here's the air intake, and here's the boot, and here's the hose connecting the intake, to the intake manifold. And look at this hose; it's got a gash in it. So instead of being a hose that was perfectly solid, it had an opening in it. And as a result is air was getting in through the gash. It's not supposed to get in. Result was that the mixture had more air and fuel than it's supposed to have. It was running lean. And the oxygen sensor, which was working fine, says there's too much oxygen here. I'm heady. Human would say I'm heady. So the emission system says the oxygen fuel ratio is wrong. It's too lean, too much air, not enough fuel, and I don't like it because I'm running inefficiently. And sure enough, my mileage went from 31.7 miles per gallon to 31.2 miles per gallon during this time when there was a gash in this hose. Now, it felt heady. It sensed too much oxygen. And it didn't like it.
What I meant by analog was, I'm saying, if you built a sensor in a computer, if you overclock the CPU, you could create a physical device that actually sucked air from your surroundings and took the moisture out of it and made it sweat. So you could touch the computer and see if it was sweating. Right now we can touch it and see if it's hot, but we might burn ourselves. But I'm saying, if you started to see the computer sweating, a little doll next to the computer, and sweat was dripping from it, you would say, oh man, it's really working out.
But in fact, you hear the fan, it speeds up, the fan will speed up. If the CPU gets hot, it'll speed up, it detects the temperature of the CPU, and it speeds up the fan if the CPU is getting hot. And if it gets too hot, it will slow down the clock speed of the CPU, and it can shut it down. So it can detect things that I can feel temperature and pressure and things, and so can these machines. They can detect temperature, pressure, moisture.
Right. They
can react to an inappropriate environmental state.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying.
My watch can detect acceleration. If I fall down and I hit the ground, my watch will say, you just fell down.
Right. You're doing movement and you're emoting right now.
Right. This thing can detect acceleration. Okay.
Yep.
And that hurts.
So Josh, when you say the little doll on the side of the CPU can say sweating, you know why? Because it's a biological, entity, and it have biological reaction. Sweat is a way to emit sweat, so you can evaporate heat away from the body. So
Well,
that's biological, reaction. We cannot turn red hot like the metal does, right? So the CPU will turn red hot. But the person that only knows sweat is hot cannot interpret that. So I understand why you need to have a little door right next to the CPU to have sweat, so that people don't understand CPU can understand it's hot.
In 1984, when you turned on the very first model Macintosh, you either had a happy face, the hardware is happy, and the software is there, or turn on a frowny face, the hardware had an error, or the software was wrong.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
already you had a happy, sad face saying everything's good or not everything's good.
The three of us, and Sam Han included, if he's listening, is we've all been working with computers long enough to know that they didn't put a lot of emotive actions into computers because they didn't want to freak people out.
But they put some in. They put happy and sad face in.
Yeah.
So that you could know that the machine was happy, that everything's good, or it's unhappy that something's not right.
Well, do you guys remember the paperclip in the Microsoft in, I think, 97?
Yeah. Right.
It emoted quite a bit. Do you remember?
But it was annoying as hell. It was annoying.
Right.
Not because it was emoting, simply because it was annoying.
You know why it's annoying?
It was making an inference. It looks like you're trying to do X. You need some help. That's an inference. It looks like you are trying. It's computing. It's inferring intent. And people didn't like the machine inferring intent, even if it was correct.
And it also had little eyes on the paperclip that would emote and do different facial.
Right.
Yeah.
And it turns out that in terms of a sentence versus a facial expression can communicate information much more readily to a human than an error message.
Yeah.
And
there's
when
little. Oh, go ahead.
When I was looking at error messages in the early days, the worst error message you can get from a computer is, you did something wrong and I ain't telling you what it is. And when babies emote and they cry, the meaning is, you did something wrong, mommy, and I ain't telling you what it is.
Yep.
What you want is an error message which is diagnostic. And as humans become more and more mature, they can give more meaningful diagnostic messages. The most annoying diagnostic messages is meaning something's wrong and I ain't giving you a clue. Blue screen of death.
That's why pediatricians have to take extra years to graduate.
Exactly. What you want is a meaningful, actionable diagnostic message. There is something wrong. Here's the name of what's wrong, and here's what has to be done to correct it.
In order for you to have the message, the programmer have to program that in and predicted that error message will come out.
And on my car, when the engine light came on and the code was, F3 or whatever it was, and the guy said, okay, I'm getting a code F3. Now I have to look it up, and it says something wrong with the fuel air mixture. And among other things, it said, check air boot. Because the air boot is the most common place where you're getting either not enough air or too much air. And sure enough, it's the air boot.
So, but the first generation error message, I bet if the air boot word was not there. This is after the 5th generation.
He had to go on the internet and look up code F3 and say, code F3 means something's wrong with the fuel air mixture. Could be your oxygen sensor's dead.
Right.
That was my first guess, was the oxygen sensor itself. No, the oxygen sensor was working fine. It was too much air. Why? Because there's a gash in the air hose.
Yeah.
And then he put some tape on it to tape up the gash, and the error message cleared.
Yeah.
And my fuel and my efficiency is going from 31.2 gradually back up to 31.7 miles per gallon. Because I'm getting optimal fuel air mixture.
And you could have noises if you use musical computation and had different notes to mean different things.
Yeah. I said to the guy, why doesn't the check engine light, instead of simply saying check emission systems, say check emission systems air fuel ratio is out of whack? And the answer is because it would put them out of a job.
Right.
They give you just enough information that you have to look up in a manual the meaning of the diagnostic message, so that you have to go to the dealer.
Right. That's why people don't like electric cars, because they put a lot of parts out of a job because there's not all that complication with the engine.
Right. You don't, there's no fuel air mixture in an electric motor.
Mhm.
And a DC motor basically doesn't even need a three gear transmission, because DC motors can change the torque automatically with the speed. They have high torque at low speed and low torque at high speed, which is exactly what a gear shift does for you, but it does it
Right.
inherently.
Yeah, I was just talking to a bunch of car enthusiasts yesterday, and they were saying they would like to take all the regular cars that they have and put battery systems into it, but the off-the-shelf battery systems aren't very good at battery management and torque management and DC motor management. So if they made some that were off the shelf, they could convert cars a lot faster over to DC engines. But that's a big controversy right now for the whole industry of, they call them ICE cars. So
The state of
combustible.
Montana has school buses. They have diesel school buses and they have electric school buses. It turns out that when it's 40 below, which it is once or twice a year in the wintertime in Montana, the electric school buses ran better than the diesel ones.
And
Diesel
that's
ones
the
don't run good at 40 below. Electric ones run fine at 40 below.
right. And there's a lot of, I'm just saying the change, what I've been trying to explain to people is to get ready for the next 5 years, and the change over to computers emoting. I think this conversation raises a real question of, are we ready to have our devices interact with us in ways that we never have before?
I'm ready. I'm more than ready to have high functioning systems that are self-managing, self-correcting, because I'm spending a lot of my time fixing things that ought not to need a PhD from Stanford to fix them.
Yeah, I think this is a big existential problem that humanity needs to, have councils and the International Standards Organization. I just looked it up last night with my ontology club. They have 800 committees and 25,000 standards. And that needs to change drastically with all of these Internet of Things standards of how to make them.
Here's another example. We're all sitting in front of computers with webcams. Now, this webcam has autofocus. If I move back or I move forward, it stays in focus on my face. Now, I have a Logitech webcam that I use in the Toastmasters meeting. And in that meeting, when the distance is like 5 or 10 feet, and the person standing in the podium moves forward and backward, it takes time to correct the focus. It can be 2 or 3 seconds before that comes back into focus. There's no reason why a really good camera can't stay in focus nearly instantaneously. If you ever watch Stephen Colbert's stand-up routine at the beginning of his program on the night program, he can move forward and backwards a good distance, and he's always in focus. And I think the reason why, and I'm not sure, but my thinking is the sensors on the cameras are so sensitive that they can now have a pinhole lens. And a pinhole lens is always in focus. If you have a big fat lens with glass, then you've got to adjust the focus mechanically. It can still be automatic, but if the tighter the aperture, the more is the depth of focus. And I'm thinking that they've got such sensitive cameras that in ordinary studio lighting, the focus is always, so everything's in focus from near to far. And as a result, Colbert can go right up to the camera and right back again, good 5 feet, and he's never out of focus.
Yeah. Have you guys seen the new feature on Apple TV? Is you can use your phone's camera as the web camera for Apple TV now.
I had no idea. Something new to me.
Yeah, there's a new feature. If you get a FaceTime call on your Apple, it'll say move, and you can move to a different device. And if you have your Apple TV, it'll say move to Apple TV. And then it says, do you want to use your phone camera? And you say yes. And then you stick the phone next to the TV, and it uses what Barry just talked about. It uses both the pinhole focus, the computer calculation, and then it uses, they call it center stage, where it takes a wide shot and starts zooming in different parts of the wide shot.
Nice.
And if you look at your smartphone, you can see that the aperture for the camera is tiny. It's a tiny lens. You know, it's what, a couple of millimeters. And the tinier the aperture, the more the depth of focus. And you
Yeah.
can get away with that in ordinary room lighting if you have a very sensitive retina on the back of the camera. So yes, I'm happy that I don't have to manually focus all the cameras in the Toastmasters room. They all have autofocus. And the expensive ones have fast autofocus, and the cheap Logitech one is slow autofocus. And you know, it's out of focus for a fraction of a second or 2 seconds. When somebody steps up to the podium, it takes it a while to get their face in focus. There's nothing I can do about it. It's autofocus, but it's still better than I could have done if I was manually focusing.
Can you imagine, 5-10 years from now when we all have Androids, there'll be different, you can take your camera off of the Android and say, go ahead and fly and follow me while we're having our FaceTime conversation and stay in front of me as I'm walking.
You know, the drone, Android can be a drone. You could say like a butterfly.
And the drone can fly into the head of the humanoid robot and fly back and be the camera of the humanoid robot, one of the cameras, because it can have 12 cameras on a humanoid robot.
Yeah.
This already existed 5 years ago, my friend.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I was working with some startup companies, and we talk about all that, and it existed. If you look around, it's in Amazon. I'm sure it's there.
Are you talking about the little drones?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one, but I'm saying it's not my companion. It's not with me to drive because once the computer gets fast enough, you don't need 20 you don't need a phone computer, a laptop computer, a desktop. You just need that one that can be the computer for all devices. It could be the computer that runs your car, like R2D2.
You talk about what's it called, that Iron Man's, the machine's name?
Well, that would be Jeeves, or not Jeeves. It's yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The machine
his butler.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and the history of the Marvel universe, that was the butler of Iron Man's father. In the old version in the 1940s, his butler became the AI.
Okay.
But the concept is, why make a bunch of computers when you could have one central computer that moves with you wherever you go?
Let me say this differently for you. So I have two 4K monitors in front of me, okay? So the question is it better to have one 8K monitors in front of me, or have two 4K monitors in front of me, so that, if one 8K will be 4K merged together into one piece of glass all together, right? The answer is that I would take the two 4K monitor anytime. You know why? If the one 8K monitors get broken or defective, I'm doomed. If one of the 4K monitors is bad, at least I have one 4K monitor I can use.
You've got a left lung and a right lung, and if one half breaks, you still have the other half working. So
you got it.
So imagine this.
Yeah,
imagine a garbage can, much like R2D2, is following you around, but inside of it, it has a little 3D printing machine area, manufacturing area, that it's continually manufacturing computer chips at, the speed of, let's just say, 2 days it took to create a new device for you. So after 48 hours, it says, here's your new device that does this. And I noticed that you needed this, so I built it for you. Here you go. And it spits it out like the entire company of Apple.
Look at system updates. We've gone from manual updates to semi-automatic to fully automatic updates. You can set your computer to automatically install the updates overnight while you're asleep.
Yeah.
Or you can set it to, I have to be present and authorize the update, or I have to manually do the updates.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are going to automated as opposed to manual because it's tedious and it's, dull and boring, unless there's an issue that you got to, pay it. You have to do I need to supervise the update? Sometimes. I'd rather not have to supervise the updates.
Well, I think what we're talking about is we've slowly integrated computers into our lives to the point where the next obvious evolution is emotion.
Absolutely, because they learn. And anything that
Right.
learns has a learning curve. And any curve has curvature. And curvature is a second derivative. And
If
that's
you just say that before every talk now, Barry, people will get it.
it's the
Really,
thing.
that's
When I say second derivative, I've lost 95% of my general
right.
audience.
But what you said after second derivative was computers learn,
Right.
humans learn, thus we need to have effective computing.
Exactly. And I first said that, I think in 1985 was the first time I said that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I can show you writings from, dated 1985 where I said that.
you were ahead of the curve back then. You saw what was coming up.
Yeah.
So ask ChatGPT to say, help me to dumb down the word second derivative. What word should I be using instead of second derivative?
Curvature. It's literally
We'll even
the
dumb down
curvature.
curvature to just emotion.
Yeah. The fact that everybody's heard of a learning curve, and it's called a curve because it's not a straight line, it curves, and therefore it has
Right.
curvature.
But a lot of people don't know what a learning curve is. They know that it exists, but they don't know what it means and how it works and what the
because they never
mathematics are.
learn.
Exactly. Thank you,
They
Sam.
never learn what a learning curve is.
They never learn what a learning curve is.
Well, that's the thing, is that a lot of words have a etymology and a technical meaning, and people learn the words without realizing that you have to go back to what, I mean, deities have names that go back 3,000 years. How
Yeah.
many people look up, why is a deity given the name that it has? Because the name that it has is the name of the value that you're elevating to the highest value in the culture. There's this word called apotheosis. You know the word apotheosis? Apotheosis says, I have a bunch of things I care about, and I can rank them from the most important to the least important. The most important is the one that's elevated to the top of the list. That's called apotheosis. Is I'm taking a particular thing I care about and I'm elevating it to the supreme level of importance. So we have, in America, we have the apotheosis of the leadership. And so George Washington is the apotheosis of the presidency. He's the first president and in some ways the most important one. Although a lot of people will say, well, no, Lincoln was the most important president. But so apotheosis is elevating something you care about to the highest level, the topmost. And in human values, the apotheosis of human values is that's the name of your deity. You name your deity after what you think is the most important thing in your culture.
Yeah, but you need to ascribe attributes to that thing in order to create an apotheosis as opposed to just a hierarchy.
Yeah. So they use word author or creator because authorship or creativity is one of the highest values. And I point out that if you take the name of the deity of Moses and you convert that into modern English, you get becoming. The phenomenon, the process of becoming is the highest value in the culture. And if you're not becoming, you're called unbecoming. And to be called unbecoming, conduct unbecoming an officer, that's basically, gets you thrown out of the army if you have conduct unbecoming. So becoming is a high value in some cultures, not in every culture.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of I don't know. I go to this ontology club because this is what we talk about, is the usefulness of a description of a thing in order to classify it that gives it function and meaning in a system.
Yeah. In Christianity, it's instead of becoming, it's salvation is the highest value. Saving something from becoming unbecoming. So something is unbecoming, saving it is more important, becomes the highest. Now, correcting the deficit.
Yeah. And the ability to master the human language and to speak to people in order to communicate whether it be propaganda or it be true knowledge and true learning, is really masterful in order to control mass groups of people.
Yeah, yeah. But if you think about it, most people will say the name of a deity. They'll say a name like Jesus without
Yeah.
realizing that Jesus means the process of becoming will save you from going down the tubes. Literally, that's what the name means. The process of becoming saves you.
Yeah, I've heard this is sort of unsubstantiated, but the word Yahweh is the chemical formula for the 4 ATCG acids inside of the body. And a lot of people, it's very controversial.
Well, that's a backronym because Yahweh is Yod He Vav He, which are 4 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which actually stood for the 3 tenses of the verb to be. If you take the verb to be, was, is, will be, in Hebrew, and you try to make telescope them into one word that's all 3 tenses at the same time, you get Yod He Vav He.
Right. But those 4 are assigned to those 4 parts of becoming, but you can loosely, descriptively describe them to the becoming of a human being through the 4 ATCG acid, like amino acids.
So you can rename ACTG, what's it called? Forget thymine. I forget cytosine.
Guamine, yeah.
But you can take the modern names and you can simply relabel them with names that correspond to those 4 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and then you got an acronym.
But that's the whole esoteric thing of religious texts, is if you look at the code behind it, did someone think about that back then?
Yeah.
And did they assign those things? And thus, when you reread the Talmud or the Torah or the Bible, it has a whole different meaning when you're using that translation, that decoder ring.
Right.
And people sit to this day. I've been in rooms with religious studies people that are trying to understand the English version of the King James Bible. And there's so many discrepancies that they're like, wait, this doesn't make sense. It was an angel, but the fallen angel, but he came before, but then God created the world before the sun. But like, they're trying to understand it because it's all written in code, because it's been translated so many times. The people that were in power, if you were able to know what it said, you would be a heretic because you're choosing to interpret it the way that you want to when they tell you how to interpret it to keep power.
Yeah. I mean, the English translation in the King James was not a very good translation. It's very poetic. It's a lovely, beautiful, poetic English translation, but a lot of the translations is not true to the original Hebrew.
Right, which is why people that speak Hebrew to this day have a disconnect with people that don't speak Hebrew.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that there's a handful of words that are transliterated but not translated. And the transliterated words are the interesting ones, because you can go back and say, okay, the guy who did the translation of the King James didn't know a translation, didn't have a translation. He simply transliterated the Hebrew. Let's go back with modern scholarship and try to figure out, what did the original Hebrew words supposedly mean? And there are some good examples of bad translations. For example, there's one translation where it refers to an animal called a unicorn. And of course, we say, well, unicorn is an imaginary animal. But if you go back to the Hebrew word that got translated as unicorn, it refers to a particular kind of ibis. And there is an ibis that lives in the Middle East. They're still alive today. And they're not unicorns. They actually have 2 horns. But the 2 horns, if you look on it in profile, the 2 horns look like one. Okay. And so when you look up in the mountain and you see an ibis, you see what looks like a unicorn, but it's actually an ibis. Okay. And so the word was ibis, but it got translated as unicorn, which is the wrong translation.
Uni one and corn meaning a horn?
Yeah. 1 horn or 2. So it really has 2 horns, but they're parallel and they're curved. And if you look at it in profile, you only see 1 instead of 2.
And then the myth comes from that, which is same as Santa Claus and all the other myths.
And well, Santa Claus was Saint Nicholas, which is a real person. And unicorn today in Silicon Valley means a startup which is doing phenomenally well.
Right. Santa Claus was St. Nicholas, but the Coca-Cola company did a bunch of depictions in this red and white outfit, which comes from the Anita Muscaria mythology around the same time
But there was
period.
somebody wrote a poem the night before Christmas so there's this poem, forget who the author was, and the modern Santa Claus is from a poem from, I think it was the 18th century. It was the night before Christmas and all through the house. And it's based on a legend about a real person who was a toy maker.
Right. So I'm saying when you take all those mythologies and you mash them all together, you get religion.
Oh, basically, here's the thing. Most people, if I were to stand up and speak mathematics, I would maybe, if I'm lucky, 1 person in 100 would know what I'm talking about. But if I tell a story, and it's a good story, 99 people out of 100 will know what I'm talking about, even though I'm making up a story. So the theologians told stories because they wanted to speak to 99 out of 100 people and not 1 out of 100.
Right,
And
which
the
is
stories,
exactly what Donald Trump does.
Right.
When he talks, he tells stories.
Tell stories.
That guy's the good guy. That guy's the bad guy. You want the good guy, not the bad guy. I'm the good guy. You're not the good guy. You're the bad guy. I'm going to tell you why you're the bad guy, because you're crooked and you're evil and you're disgusting, and we're going to need to lock you up. Okay, lock her up. Lock her up. She's the bad one. I'm the good one. Vote for me.
Appetitive desires and aversive desires. So,
But that stupid storytelling method is so effective because people that are not thinking too much just go, yeah, that is bad. Yeah, okay, maybe he is good. Okay, yeah, he's the good guy.
and even science explainers will use stories and analogies and metaphors, because if they just told you the math, they wouldn't be explaining anything. Even though the math is the correct representation, it's inaccessible to the average person. So the good science explainer will try to make up analogies and metaphors and tell stories that work, but they're lies. They're
right.
They're the kindergarten version.
Yeah.
And you have no choice. If you say equals MC square, people will think, well, that's the logo for the Twilight Zone stories. What does it mean? They have no idea what it means. So they tell stories. Okay.
And that's what we have to do with computers. We have to let them tell stories, like the story about the air filter coming in, the air intake valve. It's a story that you just told us.
Right.
Whereas usually we don't get the story. We just bring the car in. They say, right, we found the problem. We fixed it. Here's parts and labor.
Yeah. You have your emissions are out of whack. Code F3. Oh, you got a gash in your air boot hose. Oh, right. I can see the F3. Gash. I know what that means. It's like have a hole in your windpipe. It's like I'm wheezing.
Yep.
If you go to a mechanics that know how to tell story, they'll charge you a little bit more than the one that doesn't know how to tell a story.
The funny thing is
it's
that I went back to the guy who sold me the car, it was a used car, and he went on the computer, he put the code number in from the reading. He says, check air boot. He opens the hood, and then I'm standing right there, and he says, oh, here, look on this hose on the air boot. There's a gash in it. Then he tells this guy, we're gonna have to order the hose. Meantime, put some tape around it. So the guy puts some tape on the hole, and the code goes away. He says the tape will last a few days. It'll eventually fall off. He says, in the meantime, I have to order the hose, and then he didn't charge me. He didn't charge me for the reading or the temporary fix, because he knows that when he gets the hose, the part, that he's going to let me know, and I'll go in and have him, because the tape is not going to last forever.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we really are in a storytelling world. That's all it comes down to, is creating attributes to objects and telling a story about those attributes.
I thought about this a lot, and the conclusion I came up with, why is it happening? So that's what I was looking for, an answer. And it turns out that my answer for that would be, a story is the only way for you to string all the facts together in a logical manner so that people can swallow it or digest it.
So that people can swallow and digest, not because it's correct, because they can comprehend, they can get it inside their brain and it stays there. That's
So this how it goes. So if you want someone to recall 20 or 50 different characters or numbers, the way that they do it is they make a story out of the string of characters and numbers. And that's how they do it. Not because they are smarter than us, because they are capable of making up the stories for those characters that they try to remember.
When we were learning color codes of resistors in electrical engineering, we're talking about the 1960s. The double E professor says there's a mnemonic to memorize it, and since the class was all boys and no girls, he said the color code is bad boys rape our young girls, but Violet gives willingly. And that's how you remember the color code. Now, you can't do that today.
Yeah, I do that with the guitar tuning. Is Eddie ate dynamite? Goodbye, Eddie. I never forget that. That's the tuning on a guitar.
Yeah.
Anybody remember the periodic table?
I haven't. What? How do you remember it, Sam?
I forgot.
The way I remember it is a guy in my class, my chemistry class, simply pronounced the names of the columns, and he would say, Lanak Robsesafra, Bemgakasra Beira. And if you write it all out, those are the names of the elements.
Oh, wow.
And somehow or other, I remembered that. I never actually used it, but because you never really had to memorize the periodic table.
I just remember there was that. It was a play on Broadway. The anium and monium and
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So mnemonic devices are another way. And so stories are kind of a mnemonic device, and they're useful. And they're middle school. Admittedly, they're middle school, but they work. And when you get to be a professor, you have to realize that these are cutesy little ways of remembering things, but they're not the true story.
Yeah.
And you can't do the science with the story.
Yeah.
They have some explanatory power. They have zero predictive power because there's no calculation, and they have no diagnostic power. And
the way I explain this is how I play with my kids. Is that you go to a restaurant, you point a menu. I want this. So what happens? Okay, let's say I take the menu out and say, okay, here, eat it.
Exactly. In the fix-it shop, the woman who does the clerical work, the paperwork, she always uses pronouns that have no antecedent. She says, can you help me with this? And I say, this is a pronoun with no antecedent. What is the name of the thing you want help with? She never says the name of the thing. She just uses these pronouns haphazardly. No idea what she's referring to.
Yeah, this is my trouble in my English. My grammatic software always tell me, so what the hell is it? What this be specific? It's like, okay, fine.
So then they'll give you the code name F3. Okay, now the name of it is F3, but what is F3 in English?
The reason they give you F3 because they only have 2 LED that they can put symbol. If you have the whole string in there, then they have to charge you the LED big screens. Can you imagine the 21-inch screens on the computer in your car?
So I can imagine that instead of saying, check engine or check emissions, it'll say your fuel air ratio is out of whack. Check all the components of your air feed and your fuel feed. I can imagine there's no reason, there's enough room on the little display to put all that, but it doesn't yet, and may never, because it'll probably just be confusing anyway to the average driver. So at some point they make a executive decision to simply say check engine and ask your mechanic to figure it out for you.
So Barry, I want to give you a homework right now. Just do this for the ChatGPT. Say, explain how second derivative is emotion.
Let's see if I can find where's my ChatGPT? Where did I hide it? With second monitors is I don't know what's on my second monitor now. Meeting chat, that's not it. Transcript, that's not it. Where did I hide it? I think I moved it back to this window.
Okay, a new one.
No, I had to move things back to this window because I couldn't get it to work on the other window. Where did I put it? I know that I have a Chat GPT open someplace.
While you're opening it, I'll share a weird story, Sam. My friend created a riddle that ChatGPT couldn't understand. And he had us all stumped because everyone was trying to use the internet and ChatGPT and he couldn't get the riddle. It was pretty clever.
Yeah,
So
when you don't have a pure logic thing, it doesn't know how to do processing. So it's like, that's why I say ChatGPT doesn't have any common sense because it didn't grow up with us.
It actually got the riddle almost, but it didn't. It was a riddle that had no logic.
Yeah, that's what I say. You take away logic, you're done. You're done.
Yep.
It's
But
like,
that's what transformers are, right? They're logic.
all right, give me the question you want me to put into Chat GPT.
explain how second derivative is emotion.
Is related to emotion?
No, just like that.
Is emotion.
Second derivative of a learning curve.
No, the second derivative, no learning curve. Just,
Then then the answer is it has
You
no
won't
connection.
get it.
no,
It's
try
not-
it. Come on, just
It's
try
only
it.
the second derivative of a learning curve is emotion.
This,
Well, try it without that for Sam's edification.
All right. Explain how second derivative is emotion.
yep,
It's
that's
gonna
it.
say it isn't. The second derivative in the context of emotions can be well, it's going too fast. Actually, it has an answer. Second derivative in the context of emotions can be metaphorically likened to the subtle nuances and dynamics within the realm of human feelings. In mathematical terms, the second derivative represents the rate of change, and in emotional terms, it can be associated with the acceleration or deceleration of emotional experiences. Imagine the first derivative as the primary emotional response to a stimulus, such as joy or sorrow. So this is not my version of it. It's making something up, which is not bad.
The reason I don't want to put learning curve in there is because the more you stack on it, and
Right.
unknown words, you got one unknown word is enough to, to confuse you, and you have double confusing word, you're done.
No, I see what you're doing, Sam.
Thank you.
So I will put this in the chat. I'm gonna get my mouse to go to the other window.
The reason my goal is how could you substitute or maybe pause for 3 seconds and then say, okay, this is what it actually means in, differently or something like that, that allow you to decode the word second derivative in such a way that whatever you're saying makes sense.
Yeah, it's not a bad story, but it totally loses the mathematics.
Of course, like I say, I'm telling my kids to eat the menu.
So, but if I ask it, let me try to ask it the way.
It's interesting. This club that I just joined, they're putting an ontological lens on everything.
Of course.
Yeah, it's an interesting paradigm shift to look at everything as classifications, and yeah.
See, from my perspective, I don't care what perspective you're looking at. The question is the perspective helping you to resolve whatever you need to resolve or get you the outcome that you're looking for? So I'm
That's
looking
the
for
whole
the
goal of
perspective that
ontologies.
if you're stuck with the binoculars, you cannot drive with binoculars.
Actually, it doesn't really change the narrative that much.
Yeah.
By saying second derivative of a generic learning curve. It doesn't really understand the problem with ChatGPT. It doesn't do math, not yet.
Not yet.
But as soon, I mean, they're getting close to adding Wolfram Alpha or something like that, so that
Well, there's a new alpha. What's it called? Alpha math. I forgot. In Bard, I know they're trying to do a mathematical version of Bard.
Yeah, maybe if I did it to Bard, I would get a different answer than ChatGPT.
Try that. See what happens.
Let's see. So I have to go to I have to get Bard. So that would be bard.google.com.
Another outcome I want to get out of it is that even ChatGPT having trouble explaining it, so you don't feel so bad.
No, so I'm going to give the second version of it to Bard and see what I get. If I get something better.
Well, I apologize. I have to drive down to Oxnard today. So I
Okay.
have to start getting ready. I might have to leave a little early. I don't
Okay.
know what time it is. Let me see.
No worry.
It's
Your excuse. We are disappointed, but we excuse. Your excuse.
thank you. What I'm trying to figure out what time it is, and my phone isn't here. There we go. It's
It's
okay.
9:16.
I got 15 more minutes.
Got it.
Yeah. So so this notion that the curvature of a learning curve corresponds to emotions of a learning system, even though that's been in the literature for 20 years, 25 years, it's not in the Common Crawl.
Yeah.
So the narrative LLMs do not find it in the Common Crawl. Now they will find obscure references to it. So if you use the right vocabulary terms, like if you say, explain Kort's learning spiral, it's heard of Kort's learning spiral, but it doesn't know that Kort's learning spiral is a phase-plane diagram in calculus. If you say phase-plane diagram, it has no clue what you're talking about. You say Kort's learning spiral, it knows what you're talking about, doesn't know it's a phase-plane diagram.
I just put the sentence that way, explain it from Bard, from my Bard. I don't know whether your Bards have the same thing or not.
Well, it's also a question whether Bard already has this new update in it or not. I don't know. I did see an advertisement.
Is
for
it
that.
called Alpha Math? Do you know what it's called, Barry? This new mathematical version of Bard or Gemini?
Sam? No, I don't know what it's called. It's supposed to be Bard with math smarts of some sort. But
I
what it's
just
called,
heard they. Let me see if I can look it up. Let's see.
I saw an announcement yesterday that it has math smarts of some sort.
Yeah, I never told you guys yet. I paid the co-pilot $30 a month with Microsoft,
Yeah.
and because I want the enterprise version of the co-pilot. Anyway, this is the answer that for my $30 a month co-pilot kit. They made me pay $360 a year.
Did they refund the overcharge of your
No, I don't see it yet.
ChatGPT-4?
I haven't seen it yet.
I mean, I don't know that they would. It was
Yeah,
just
don't worry about it. It's not important. I don't care.
It was like 2 months worth of it was like December and January, I think.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's small potatoes. So anyway, the answer back was the second derivative is a mathematical concept. I put it in the chat, by the way.
I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not directly to emotion. However, some people may use a concept or second derivative as a metaphor to describe how emotion can be changed.
In fact, it's not just a metaphor. It's mathematically equivalent to the second derivative. See, here's the thing. Now, if you ask it, try asking it, have you ever heard of Kort's learning spiral in the relationship?
Type it up for me so I can copy and paste, Barry.
All right.
I'm not good at typing. I may not get it right.
Apologize. It's alpha geometry, not alpha math.
Alpha geometry.
Yeah, it's Google's.
New alpha geometry. Why is it geometry? I mean, it's not mathematicals in general.
I guess they're trying to put the language model against Olympiad mathematics with geometry. Right now, they're doing geometry questions.
All right, there it is, Sam.
Okay, I'm copying it and pasting it to my deluxe version of the Copilot and see what it says.
And if it says, yeah, it's the phase plane diagram, then it really got it. I don't think it will, though. I don't think it'll say phase plane diagram.
Hey, not bad. Here's the answer back.
Oh, wow. ChatGPT says, you're absolutely right. I apologize for not mentioning Kort's learning spiral in my previous response. it's a highly relevant model that directly addresses the connection between emotions and learning. I should have brought it to your attention. Yeah, definitely knows
Fantastic.
about it. However, its description of it is wrong.
It's trying, Barry.
It's not completely right. It's not completely wrong. It's just kind of a bit muddled. And
Mhm.
I don't think it mentions that it's phase plane diagram. Let me ask it that. How?
So you see my answer back. Did you see the answer I gave you? You got unconscious incompetent, conscious incompetent, conscious competent, and unconscious competent. Which is I'm very familiar with NLP. Roger Kort.
I'm going to ask it, how does Kort's learning spiral relate to the concept of a phase plane diagram in calculus? See if it gets that. Because that's what it is. That's just another name for it. See, it says it's not a direct or perfect analogy. So it doesn't know that a Kort's learning spiral is the same as a phase plane diagram. It thinks they're two different things. Or in fact, somebody simply took my phase plane diagram and renamed it Kort's learning spiral. Oh, this is even worse. Dr. Roger Kort. It's confabulating. I am not Dr. Roger Kort. That's completely amazing, Sam. Confabulating.
Come on, from now on, I'm calling you Dr. Roger Kort.
Hey, Sam, ask your whichever one you're talking to, is Dr. Roger Kort related to Dr. Barry Kort? And see what it says.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, these models are still learning.
These things confabulate like crazy.
Yep. They're I start looking at them now just as predictive text models.
Yeah. This is why I really, when you ask it about something that you're a subject matter expert in, or maybe even the original author in, and you realize it doesn't have it. It's confabulating. It's
But
hallucinating.
you know what's funny is human beings confabulate all the time too. So if it can confabulate at the close to the level of a human being, it's functioning in society.
It can run for president.
It probably could be great. I really think ChatGPT will be the next president, without a doubt.
That's what Harry, what's his name, say, that this is the end of the human history.
So what happened when you asked it to compare Roger Kort to Barry Kort? Did it answer?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, I've come across this in other contexts where the narratives basically are just in la la land.
Okay, you have this answer here, Barry.
Is the brother. So Roger Kort is my brother.
He's got to be. He's got the same last name. That's logical.
It's basically lying to you. It's confabulating. I do have a brother. His name is Stephen, and he doesn't do the same kind of work I do. Completely different.
Maybe he take your information and post it and how he got his Roger name.
Ask for a citation of a paper written by Dr. Roger Kort. Ask for a reference that authored by Dr. Barry Kort, Dr. Roger Kort.
I'm going to say goodbye. Let you guys play with the language model. Good to see you.
This is why I don't think it's worth $20 a month.
It will be.
It will be, but the fact that it can cavalierly confabulate like that is very worrisome.
I have a guy I follow who's an AI, enthusiast, and what he's been doing is taking all in ChatGPT, all of the little plugins, and running them in different sequences. And it's getting close. It's not there, but he's been getting some, he gets an error message every time, and then it does the thing. So it's right at that cusp.
Yeah. It's basically you get a B-. You're
Yeah.
aware of the topic, you know a little bit about it, but you're not the authoritative reciter.
Yeah, I would say if I was the teacher, I'd give it a C plus maybe, or a C
Yeah.
minus.
Yeah. So basically, it's not completely wrong, but it's got enough mistakes in it that's misleading.
Yep. Well, see, I'll hopefully if I'm around tomorrow morning, I don't know. I'll be at a hotel, so hopefully I see you tomorrow. Cheers.
Okay.
Have a good
Okay.
trip.
So they say, I'm sorry, I don't have any information about article written by Dr. Roger Kort. However, you can search for his article.
Now ask it if it knows the article's written by Barry Kort. See, the question is how does it know how Roger Kort is related to me if he has never? I mean, you can ask it, questions that will make it admit that it's making stuff up.
Yep.
I mean, other than the Roger Kort stuff, I would give it sort of a B minus to a C plus for knowing something about the topic without having the correct insight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, this is also true of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is maybe not as bad as ChatGPT, but the more esoteric the topic, the more likely Wikipedia is going to give you a misleading take on the topic.
Yeah, Dr. Barry Kort has written several articles on the role of emotion on learning.
Now, listen to this. One of his well-known articles is, quote, an architecture of play, 4 centuries of play and learning. I never wrote any such article. That's completely made up.
I have no idea.
Now, it's true that I co-authored with Rob Riley. That's true. But that's not the name of the article. He and I didn't write that article. There's no such article. Try to find that article. Doesn't exist. In fact, the second one is also a made-up title. The 2 titles are made up. 4 centuries of play and learning.
Maybe give you some inspiration.
Both of those are made-up titles. Ask it what journal and what year they were written. Ask it for the rest of the citation. What's the name of the journal and year of those 2 articles?
You can ask for a link.
Or you can ask for a link, but you can ask for in what journal was it published and in what year? See, these things are not trained. These things do not read the journals.
That's all right.
Remember, they're just computing the probable next word. So it's not improbable. Those are not improbable titles. They're simply not actual titles.
I'm sorry, I don't have direct link to the article on architecture of
Does it give
play.
you the name of the journal or the year?
Name of the
Yeah.
journal.
He doesn't have it because they don't exist. This is the thing. It doesn't realize it's confabulating because it's just generating probable next continuations of the sentence.
Like I say, it's called blind spot, right? So how do you it's like asking the teacher the best question you can answer. Anybody that doesn't, any student that's not here, raise your hand, right?
Exactly. So it can surmise a probable title, and that's a probable title. It just happens not to be the correct title.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have the information about the article specific journal or year.
Yeah. So, and I noticed that way back when we first started doing this back in March, April, May of
Right.
last year, that it was making stuff up, and it's still making stuff up, cavalierly confabulating stuff as if it's authoritative.
I'm looking from the mathematical perspective, right? So if you're going to predict what's the most probable, most correct next letter or next word is think of it like the blind leading the blind. The way I think of it that way.
It should know better than to confabulate the title and author of an article.
Well,
It
how
really-
does it know better? What structure in that form the structure of remember this I keep going back to the ground truth of this, how they work is that its large language model is predicting what the next most likely letter of word is.
Yeah. But you see, if you're going to say one of his well-known articles. Now, if you turn around and say well-known article means you should be able to find it. But it doesn't say, how do I know what I just said is true? I can confabulate, then I ask myself, is that right or did I just make that up? And then I'll say, well, let me check to see if what I just said can be found in the actual literature.
Right. So if I use
the answer is it can't be found in the actual literature.
If I use a metaphor again, mathematical model. If I use a metaphor I use a lot is that this is how I explain AI with a lot of people that are talking to me about it. It's like a parrot with 1 billion words.
Yeah.
They have no way to check it. All it does, it has a vocabulary. That's it.
By the way, did you hear the story about the gray parrot in the park, the animal preserve park that curses?
Yeah, I heard about that, but I didn't read the story. What's it about?
Yeah. So there's an animal preserve that's got some gray parrots in it, and the gray parrots imitate what they hear humans say, and they hear humans cursing,
And good.
and they repeat these curse words that they've heard. They have no idea what they're saying.
Yeah.
But there's a whole group of gray parrots which are cursing, saying bad words because they picked them up from the visitors.
Yeah, I saw the title of the article, but I didn't reach further down.
Just
But
a few
again-
of the many articles. Now, it's true that I've written more than one article, but many?
So the question I like to focus on is how can we make use of whatever it has instead of trying to keep going back. Now that we know, for example, like I said before, it's like autopilot for the driverless car is that cross traffic is very difficult because of capacity of the what do you call that, the angle of the cameras, right? So it's like we know the weakness. We know that the parrot doesn't check out reference, and you know that parrot doesn't verify any facts. All it knows is
It's just an echo, literally an echo.
yeah.
And an echo echoes back exactly what it heard, but it doesn't mean that what it heard is the ground truth. It's just echoing back. So if you go to Wikipedia and there's an assertion in Wikipedia, and then there is a footnote reference, then you go to the footnote and you actually read the article in the footnote, and you can determine whether the article supports what's up in the body of the article. I have found in Wikipedia that a person will put in an assertion, attach a footnote to a reference, and if you read the reference does not support. So you can make it look like you have supporting evidence, but when you double check it, the supporting document exists. It doesn't say what you claimed it said.
Right. So we need to have the surgery on the parrot that's not only repeating word, but also we need to have a cross-reference assertion.
This one, it can't even give you a reference.
Right.
Hey, what's your reference? It says, I don't have a reference.
Right.
Wikipedia says, here's the reference, but I'm lying about what the reference says.
Yeah. It doesn't know it's lying. Again, it doesn't have the capability of it. How does parrot knows that it's lying?
It's so easy to give what looks like a footnote authoritative reference, where the authoritative reference doesn't authoritatively say that. Here's an example that just came up today. Actually came up before, but on Wikipedia, not on Wikipedia, on Facebook, I keep seeing a quote attributed to Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, about the first evidence of civilization is a healed femur bone. Because if somebody breaks a femur and it's healed, that means somebody took care of them. And the argument is that's Margaret Mead's claim to the first evidence of civilization, not pottery, but a healed femur bone. And I saw that claim multiple times. And finally, either I or somebody else went to double check it. And it appears to be a bogus story about Margaret Mead. So then I asked Nora Bateson, who's a living person, who is the half sister of Margaret Mead, or the half sister, half daughter. I forget now which. I think half daughter. And I said, this appears to be a bogus story, apocryphal story. Do you know if Margaret Mead ever actually said that? And Nora Bateson today said, I'm pretty sure she never said that. So then I said, well, where does this come from? So it turns out it's in a book. There's a book by a guy named Ira something or other, in which this story appears. And the story in this book is a student claims he asked Margaret Mead, and the student recites the story, and the story recited by the student is in this book. But in fact, whether or not the student ever existed, or whether the story the student makes up is the true story, there's no evidence that Margaret Mead ever actually said this third-hand account.
Right.
And yet it's ubiquitous. Margaret Mead says the first evidence of civilization is a healed femur bone.
Right.
Nora Bateson says, as far as I know, Margaret Mead never said that.
Yeah. So it's like this is like a hearsay in a court of law.
Yeah, it's hearsay. A student claims that he heard Margaret Mead say that.
That's right.
Does the student actually exist? If so,
Right.
is the story the student recited correct? And why is it in a book by another person much later in history of time that supposedly the student is reciting this quote, true story from Margaret Mead?
So what is ChatGPT or Bard say about the beginning of the civilization?
You can ask it. I don't know. You can ask. Why don't you ask Margaret Mead? Why don't you ask ChatGPT? What does Margaret Mead claim is the evidence, the oldest evidence of civilization? And see what
You can type faster than I do. Go for it.
All right. So which one are you going to do, ChatGPT or Bard?
Whichever you prefer, whatever is in front of you.
Right. So what does Margaret Mead say is the oldest evidence of civilization? Question. There is a common quote attributed to anthropologist Margaret Mead where she claims the oldest evidence is a healed femur bone. She supposedly said that in Societies Without Modern Medicine. Okay, blah, blah, blah. However, there's no evidence that Margaret Mead ever actually said this. While the sentiment is widely shared and resonates with many, the story seems to be more of an apocryphal tale than a verified quote. Several anthropologists, including Mead students, have refuted the story, and no academic sources credit her with saying it. While the exact origin of the quote remains unclear, it highlights an interesting perspective. So, okay, and in fact, you can find this quote in a published book by an author. Okay, but so here, which one? I mean, this is Bard. So Bard says, yes, there's a common quote. It's unverified and probably, what does it say? Apocryphal. Yeah. Can ask the same thing of ChatGPT.
Copy and paste it there. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me go over and copy it to ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT says. See what ChatGPT says. Margaret Mead, a cultural anthropologist, did not specifically identify the single oldest evidence. However, she contributed significantly to the field. Oh, that's all true. So this one does not recite the story. Does not mention the story, does not recite the story, and doesn't even say what Margaret Mead believed was the oldest evidence. So ChatGPT is correct, but it doesn't do what Bard does, which is point out this fake quote, this unattributed quote.
So Bart win this time.
So I think Bard does a better job because it gives the common quote, which is unsupported and probably apocryphal. In fact, that was the word I used, apocryphal. It's an apocryphal story because it's been debunked and no evidence she ever actually said. And her half daughter, well, her Margaret Mead was married to Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson had a daughter by a second wife.
Mm.
So Margaret Mead is not her, what is this, her stepmother, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Except that I don't quite know. I guess they were divorced, then he remarried, and then Nora is the daughter from the second wife. So although Margaret Mead is
The first wife.
her father's first wife, and she obviously knew Margaret Mead because Margaret Mead was still alive when Nora was growing up. And I think, I don't quite know, how to characterize relationship. If father gets married a second time and has a daughter by a second mother.
Yeah, it doesn't have stepdaughter. Usually you take over from the first wife.
Yeah, this is the other way. This is backwards from a stepdaughter. But nonetheless.
Yes, you see a stepdaughter, from the language perspective.
Yeah. Now Nora Bateson has a sister who's the biological daughter of Margaret Mead. What's the name of the stepdaughter? I mean, the stepsister. Who is, I forget. Who is Nora Bateson's half sister who just died? Who died recently? Let's see if ChatGPT. Oh, ChatGPT might not know this because this is recent. I have to ask Bard.
Yeah.
ChatGPT doesn't know recent stuff.
At least a couple of years back.
Wait a minute. I did ask Bard. No, I did ask Bard. Bard didn't know. All right. I'll try. Let me rephrase it. Who is
They got one that just died.
Gregory Bateson's daughter?
Yeah, that's
Daughter who died recently. Mary Catherine Bateson. Yeah. So yeah, it's easy to confuse Margaret Bateson, which was Gregory Bateson's first wife, with Mary Catherine Bateson, which was their daughter, who's the half sister of Nora. Yeah. So Nora is not genetically related to Margaret Mead. But nonetheless, she would be the most reliable source to whether Margaret Mead ever said this quote, which was attributed to her. Mary Catherine Bateson was also an anthropologist like her mother. Whereas Nora is photojournal. Well, she's a journalist, I think, is how you would characterize her. I'm not sure how to characterize Nora, except that Nora is very much alive, and she's a Facebook friend of mine, even though I've never met her.
Yeah, anthropology is one of my favorite subjects as well. So,
well, you know that I consider my alter ego Barsoom Torque, anthropologist from Mars. If I were a Martian sentient being looking down on Earth and trying to make sense of Earth culture,
right,
Homo schleppians, I'm an anthropologist from Mars, which is stolen from Who's it stolen from? What's her name? The woman who's famous woman who's autistic. Jeez, I'm really losing my ability to pull up names.
Well, that's why you have Bard and ChatGPT to help you.
Right.
Because you know the story behind it. You see how you hold on to the story, and the story will allow you to fish out the facts, just like the how you pronounce those words on the periodic table.
Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin was the woman who
Artistic.
was autistic, and she wrote a couple of books. But she is the one that Oliver Sacks wrote about in his book, An Anthropologist on Mars. And the chapter, An Anthropologist on Mars, is about Temple Grandin. And so I stole the Anthropologist on Mars to make Bar-Sumtoric Anthropologist from Mars. Anyhow.
I forget, how's the monitor working out? You got your cables?
So it turned out that the cable you sent me was the only dual link cable
Right.
at hand.
Okay.
All the others I had turned out not to be dual link. So I went on to Temu and I ordered a 24+1 cable, mail to mail, thinking that a 24+1 is equivalent to a dual link. Turned out, no. The 24+1 cables can be wired up either as dual link or as VGA, HDMI, plus USB.
Wow.
It turned out that the labeling on Temu was incomplete.
Yeah.
So when they came and I hooked them up, it turned out they weren't dual link cables. They were
Single link.
They were DVI-I plus USB.
Yeah, so
then I went.
You remember last time I say the DVI have like 20 different versions of it. Like, it's driving me absolutely crazy.
I couldn't tell from the Temu description that this was not a DVI-D. It said high speed 24+1.
Right.
And a DVI-D is 24+1. It is high speed, but it turns out you can wire them up to be DVI-I plus USB.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so then I went on to eBay and I found one that expressly said this is dual link.
Right.
And I ordered it. It's going to arrive. It's probably here today. It's arriving in today's mail. It's now almost 1 p.m. here. So it's probably out in my mailbox right now.
Okay.
But after I get off of here, I'll go check my mail. And if it's correct, I'll have now 3 cables.
Okay.
And I've got 2 machines that I proved can produce the 2600 by 1680 or whatever.
Yeah, I forgot anyway.
I have one computer, a Mac Pro, which supposedly is qualified to do that high definition. And when I first hook it up, it comes up fine. But after a minute, it goes noisy. It's the first minute, it's good and solid, full definition. And then if I leave it connected after about a minute, it starts going into a noise mode. And I can't figure out if it's I thought it was maybe something is wrong with that old adapter. And then this machine I'm on now, this iMac, I'm sure will support it too, but they're in different parts of the house.
Right.
So if I put the monitor upstairs and I leave the iMac downstairs, then I have 2 machines that will drive it for sure. And then if I have any other machines that I can move upstairs,
okay,
I'll have at least 2 known machines that can drive it. And I think that if you hook up the high definition monitor, then you cannot use the second link for another monitor, because it can only do 2 monitors at intermediate or 1 at the super high. And
yeah, play with it and let me know. Yeah,
but I won't know until I get the 2 new cables and make sure that they really are dual link cables. Turned out I didn't have any dual link cables, except you had included one in the shipment.
Yeah,
You can't tell by looking at them.
Yeah, it's
They look identical. They're 24 plus 1. They're
of
identical.
all the evolution of the cable video cable, dual DVI is the one that drives me absolutely up the wall.
So it turns out the DVI-I can look like can be a 24 plus 1
Yeah.
and yet be wired up incorrectly, wired up for VGA. Well, wired up to support VGA, whereas the dual link doesn't support the VGA.
Right.
And also it turned out that some of these cables can also support USB, which I didn't even know was even an option. Because I don't know any devices that can feed the USB out the DVI connector port.
But at least if you have the DVI ports, then you can plug in any computer like what's it called? What do you call that? The Barry thing. Have you built any of those Barry? The Pi Barry, the Pi.
Oh, Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
Well, it's possible that homebrew stuff like Raspberry Pi supports, these other modes. Plus,
Yeah.
there's a wide version of the DVI that I've got one machine that's got the wide port on it, but I've never seen a wide cable.
Right.
But there's even more obscure. There's the DVI standard and the DVI wide.
Yeah, I give up on that one. That's like anytime with DVI, I stay away from it. That's all I can tell. DVI.
Yeah, I think it's like 28 plus 1 or plus whatever.
It's crazy.
And then there's the one that has the short like a hyphen, the long like a long, and then there's a plus.
Yeah.
There's a plus with 4 pins. I go, holy shamola, you've got, the short horizontal, the long horizontal, the plus, and the plus with the pins. Like, come on, what the hell?
Exactly right. Yeah, that's what I said. DVI is the only cable that I stay away from. It's like whenever a customer say I have a DVI monitor, I say, oh, good luck, figure that out.
I can see why, because there's at least maybe a half a dozen or maybe even 8 possible different configurations for DVI cable wiring.
Yeah, so once you start with the dual link digital, then you're good. That's one you can count.
And the thing is, don't go into Temu and buy a 24 plus 1 high speed, because that ain't DVI-D.
Yeah.
It did not point out.
Yeah.
Because when you get the package says VGA plus HDMI plus USB. I go, what? But the advertisement on Temu doesn't say that. It doesn't say VGA plus HDMI plus USB. It just says high speed 24 plus 1.
Is it easy to return the product to Temu?
It is and it isn't. The point is, it's not worth it, because I got 2 4-foot cables for only like $8.
Okay. So
And to send them back to China is going to cost more than $8. So I figured
they don't give you something like Amazon that
even though they say that you can return it in 30 days, you have to pay the return postage. See, return postage to China is a lot more than incoming. Incoming, they have this thing that is supported by the Chinese government.
right.
This something packet or whatever it's called. But sending it back to China is not.
It's not supported by Chinese government.
No. So the idea is that yes, you can return it, but you got to pay a ton of postage return.
Right.
Anyhow, it was only like $8 or something.
Okay, cool.
I'll just keep them.
Yeah.
It's not the first time that I bought something that turned out to be other than what I thought it was.
Yeah.
It's not an expensive mistake.
That's good. Okay, just checking, making sure you're doing
Anyway,
good.
we're coming up on 1 o'clock, so we're probably running out of time here.
Yeah, ready with that.
Unless there's something you want
I'm good.
to do in the 5 minutes before the top of the hour. But yeah, so anyway, the monitor itself is good. The one cable you sent me is good, except it only works on 2 of my machines, not the third one. And I got 2 cables in the mail.
Right, and your iPhone is working good.
iPhone is working great. One thing about the iPhone, I turned on BBC News on the iPhone, and I was getting the BBC News
on the
coming here.
watch.
I can't figure out how to turn it off. It's nice to have BBC News, but I'm just keeping me every hour with BBC News. I can't figure out how to turn it off.
Yeah. So a lot of the control functions are on the My Watch function on the iPhone. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I have to go back to the iPhone and say, turn off BBC News on the iPhone.
Right. No,
I haven't
basically,
figured out how to-
a lot of this is in the what do you call that app? Watch app right here.
Oh, okay. I'll figure it out. It's just that I was getting BBC News on the iWatch, and I go,
Yeah. So all you do is you go to iWatch. You see the black thing right here.
yeah.
Yeah. So the app, that's if you click on it, it becomes the Watch app. So that's how you control
Well, then I can tell it what to.
what uninstall, what to install on it. So if you go to the bottom, it tells you like.
See, I had BBC News on the iPhone.
See how I say available app?
Yeah. So the question is, once you launch an app on the iPhone, how do you unlaunch it?
On the iPhone?
Yeah.
So like right now,
Yeah.
okay, all you do is you see how this line is? You slide up
Oh,
and then just push it away.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Or you can just ask GDP teach you how to do that.
Let me save the chat. Well, actually, I don't know if I have to save the chat, but I'll save the transcript too. How do I save the transcript? Where's the save transcript department? Oh, there it is, save transcript. When I've saved the chat and I'll save the transcript, I'll put those in the message. Facebook.
All right. Sounds good.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.